All right, welcome in everyone. We've just opened up the room, so I'm going to give everyone just a few minutes. It does take Zoom a few minutes to let anyone in who's waiting and anyone who is just running a minute or two late. While we're waiting for anyone who is running just a moment later, waiting to come into the room, I want to welcome you all to our latest installment of our virtual author visit here at the Lincoln Public Library. This is a fantastic program that we do that allows us to talk to authors from all around the world about their work and introduce you, hopefully, to some new authors you might love, or if it's an author that you're already excited about and a fan of, give you a chance to ask some questions and learn a little bit more about their work and the people behind it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Hunt. I'm the director of the library. I have the great pleasure and honor of talking with our authors in these programs. Just to give everybody a brief housekeeping of how this works, our author today, Thea and I, are going to spend some time talking about her work, her fantastic debut novel, Hurricane Wars. We're going to talk for about 20-25 minutes. After that, we are going to have an audience Q&A. The preference for how this works is for you all to drop your questions into the Q&A option here in Zoom. If you're on a desktop, you'll see that at the bottom of your screen. It's going to open up a little chat box. You can drop your questions in there at any point in the conversation. You don't need to hold on to them to the end, and we'll start working through them in that question and answer period. That gives us, if you put it in earlier, a good idea of how many questions we have, because if we have a lot, I can stop talking sooner. So yes, use that Q&A section. If there's something else, if you're having some technical difficulties, anything like that, go ahead and use the chat. I do have one of my colleagues here under that Lincoln Public Library name who can help you with any of those issues, but we're not going to be checking the chat for questions for Thea, who is our author today. So with that, we are going to go ahead and get started. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you all Thea Guanzon, who is the author, as I mentioned, of The Hurricane Wars, the first book in a planned trilogy, and a USA Today, New York Times, Sunday Times, Barnes and Noble best-selling title. It has been out for, I think, just about a month at this point. She comes from a background in international studies, but is a fantastic author, as well as a traveler, a fangirl, a reader of fantasy, and a D&D dungeon master, I believe is correct, which is fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us. This is so exciting. How are you today?
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me. It's so amazing to be here. This is my first virtual library visit. And yeah, I'm just so honored. And I'm doing great. Yeah, it's 9:34 a.m. in the Philippines.
Well,
It's
thank you
not
so much.
like my usual wake up time because I'm usually asleep during this time. But for this, of course, I was happy to wake up for it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I know we were scheduling this, managing the time difference, which I guess is one of the amazing things about the technology we have now that we're able to do this because it is a delight to be able to talk to you. So this Hurricane Wars is your debut novel. For all our attendees tonight, too, we do have several copies of these funded by our friends of the library, and we'll be giving them away to a couple lucky attendees. So if you don't have a copy yet, you will get one. If you have a copy, you can give it to a friend. But writing wasn't necessarily what you originally aspired to do. What did you think you'd be doing right now at this point in your life if writing hadn't happened?
Oh my God, that is such a loaded question. Okay, so I live in the Philippines. I come from like a traditional Filipino family. Everyone in my family, no exceptions, is either a doctor or a lawyer. Like I'm serious. They all have medicine degrees, law degrees. And so I guess I grew up thinking like, okay, like that is my path. It's either a doctor or a lawyer. And so writing was always like my all-consuming passion, I would say, but I never allowed myself to think that it was a viable career precisely because of me having to grow up in with that kind of like with all those expectations, all that pressure. And then, so I was on the pre-med path for a while, actually. Yeah, I was in STEM for I think 2 years, and then I realized, okay, I'm really not happy with this. Can we, can we, um, can we like reset? And so I switched to international studies. So I graduated with a degree in international studies with my specialization being international politics. And I also have a minor in peace studies, which is basically conflict resolution and stuff like that. And also studies about like structural justice. And so after that, I was all set on like, taking the foreign service exam and becoming a foreign service officer because like it wasn't quite like being a doctor or a lawyer, but I think it was close enough and I could always go to law school after. I think that was what my family was thinking. But then of course, like through all of this, I just really loved to write. Like when I started working after graduation, I was working for an organization where we went around the country encouraging Filipino women to participate in the local political scene to enhance their participation in the democratic process. So I would go from one end of the country to the other, giving seminars, teaching women how to fill out the ballot forms, how to fill out the certificates of candidacy, and basically just making sure that this marginalized group has more voices at the table to represent them. And that was really great. I was really fulfilled with that. I thought that it was very important to do that, but at the same time, like I don't know, like there was this there was this feeling inside me like, oh, I wish I was writing. Like I had so many stories inside my head. And then so I guess the outlet for that was writing fanfic. So for around 7 years, I would write fanfic during my lunch break at work. Like I wouldn't even write it on the computer. I would have like this yellow legal pad because that was the paper that we had at the office. And then I would just write like fanfic there, and then I would get home and then I'd post the fanfic to AO3. And that was my life for 7 years. And the pandemic happened, and I think the Philippines had one of the world's longest lockdown. Sorry, it lasted for like months. You could literally be jailed if you left your house. That was how strict it was here. And so I had a lot of time to sit at home and think about what I really wanted. Like I was having an existential crisis. And as luck would have it, that was when someone in the publishing industry, in the American publishing industry, reached out to me because they had read my fics before, and then they asked me if I had ever considered writing an original novel. And well, it was locked down. There was nowhere to go, so I said, okay, yeah, let's give this a shot. And yeah, I haven't looked back since.
That's fantastic. And that's really interesting. And I love that you're talking about that, so much of the early writing you did was fan fiction and transformative works. Because I feel like there was a period of time where that was kind of its own form of writing that we didn't really talk about. But anyone who practices writing for 7 years, I mean, you're writing, you're building stories, you're finding out how to work with characters, you're finding the stories that matter to you. And obviously, you honed your craft, and we have this fantastic novel that has been born out of that. And so that's really fantastic. Not the pandemic and the quarantine and all of those
Yeah.
pieces, but with that journey of coming through and having those stories and that community to kind of get feedback and build in.
Yeah, so I think that after the book has come out, so my parents attended my book launch, and I think that was when they realized that, okay, like maybe this is an actual job after all. Like maybe this is a real job. And then, and then I remember when I said that the book had hit the New York Times bestseller list, my mom like actually cried. I was like, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just so happy. I didn't think you would get it together." I'm like, what is happening? That was such an Asian parent thing to say.
But it is a huge achievement. I mean, I don't know if I would say that getting it together, but it's a huge achievement. I'm glad she was as excited as that deserves. I mean, that is such a goal for so many writers to make that list.
I really owe it to like my fandom, my online community, and I also owe it to the Filipino diaspora. I mean, I think like I think like there were a lot of them that when they heard that a book by a Filipino author was coming out, I think they really did a great job like spreading the word to the other Filipinos all over the US. And yeah, I'm very grateful of.
Well, and that Filipino perspective and Filipino history and mythology and tradition, that's really built into your novel. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that informs your work?
So the very first draft of the Hurricane Wars started out as like, so I grew up reading fantasy books. So I started when I started world building for the Hurricane Wars, what I wrote, the original setting, it was like it was based on the fantasy that I grew up reading, the fantasy that is inundated that inundates mainstream media. So it was very Eurocentric and stuff. So because like I have no personal connection to it, so the world at first was very dry. Like I was so uninvested in it. Like all I cared about was the story. Like was all I cared about was the love story, and because of that, I do think the first draft suffered because the world did not feel lived in. It did not feel authentic, and but I thought that was what it had to be because that was what I grew up reading. But then my agent Saule, she asked me, like, she read the draft and she said, why don't you take inspiration from Southeast Asia, where you actually live? And it was like a light bulb went off in my head because first of all, I did not know that I don't know, there was just something in me that was sort of like blocking me from thinking that I could do that. I think that's something that definitely needs to be interrogated about ourselves. But yeah, and so I was like, oh yeah, yeah, okay, let's give it a shot. And for me, that was when the world of Lear really began to take shape because this time I was basing it on Southeast Asian mythology and traditions, particularly Filipino culture, and it was something that I know, something that I love, something that I'm very proud of being a part of. And yeah, so that was definitely what made the world richer, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's really important to note because I think in at least English language publishing, we're really bad at naming that what we call kind of traditional high fantasy tropes really are based very particularly on European and often British traditions. I mean, whether that's the mythology and religious background of that area or just kind of we all love to take the feudal medieval atmosphere and see that kind of remade into see Game of Thrones, anything like that. And we're really bad about naming that we're talking about a specific cultural tradition. We're just like, oh, it's fantasy. And yeah, I mean, your comment about that, about writing a story, thinking that's what fantasy looks like, it reminds me of Nigerian author Adichie's amazing TED Talk, where she talks about writing her first stories of kids playing in snow because she grew up reading books published
Yeah.
in Britain. And that's not really an experience she had playing in snow and finding that voice. And so I think having novels, that especially in trope or in fantasy or in some of our genres that do specifically pull from your experiences, your history, the things that you're proud and love, builds the room for those voices for everyone else who's going to be reading them because now they get more visions of what world building can look like.
Yeah, it's been quite emotional actually, because when the advanced copy started trickling out, there were a lot of Filipino ARC readers, Filipino American ARC readers, and I have since that day I have been getting like a lot of messages from them, talking about how much they miss home and how the book made them feel like they were back home. And I oh wait, I'm tearing up again. But anyway, like it was not something that I had previously given a lot of thought to. I think because I have lived here in the Philippines my whole life and I consume local media. I speak uh I speak the Filipino language and everyone around me is Filipino. So I think like it was I think representation was not really an issue that I could speak on or that I could give a lot of thought to. But ever since the arcs came out and ever since I started talking with like Filipino American readers and Filipino readers in other countries, that was when I realized what a big thing representation is. Although I probably will never be able to really grasp all the nuances of that situation because I'm not an immigrant, but it is something I that I will definitely bear in mind like moving forward with the rest of my writing.
Do you think as you've gotten that feedback, depending, I'm not sure where you are. I know this is a trilogy with your future books. Is that something that's going to influence the next couple books in this series, or do you have that pretty well planned out at this point?
Well, I was actually like thinking that maybe the next books like I had finished like building up the world and stuff in book one, so I was like, okay, maybe we can sort of pull back on the Southeast Asian elements for now. But I think like after communicating with the readers who were so happy to see themselves, to see like their homeland talked about in book one. I think like it's made me even more determined to make it even more Filipino and more Southeast Asian. So we shall see.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because of course you do have beyond just the world building, you have these fantastic characters who are going and making their choices and moving through this world you've built, which is, very notably, you have a fantastic romance in this novel. You're saying was where you started. Um, can you, so I know that you've spoken before about, in this novel, we're working with a very kind of specific trope that's very popular, enemies to lovers. Can you talk a little bit about like working in tropes and how that works in building your work and using that for tension, but also making it true and unique to the characters in the story you're telling?
So I think that literary tropes are very like I am a big fan of tropes because I think like okay, it's a trope for a reason, right? Because it's something that has become so popular and so sought after by consumers of media that it has its own conventions, it has its own name. Like on TV tropes, I think there are a lot of sub tropes under the enemies to lovers dynamic. There's like kiss uh, oh my god, I keep forgetting. But like it's like kiss kiss slap or no, slap slap kiss, stuff like that. I think like I think I think working with tropes is it's nice because you sort of know like you know the vibe that you're going for, right? Like you know what you're working towards and the people who are reading your work like they know what to expect in a sense. Like they don't know the full story, but they know where it's going. They know what you're inspired by. So yeah, so working with tropes is great, but at the same time it's also like you have these conventions, but you are also free to do whatever you want with them. Like you are free to interpret the tropes according to how you perceive them. You're free to put your own spin on it, and I think that's something that's also really cool. And then with enemies to lovers in particular, I am a huge enemies to lovers fan. I think ever since I was a kid, all of my ships, all of my ODPs have been enemies to lovers. So it was just so nice to like get the chance to share my own enemies to lovers story with the world and this time to sort of root it in like my culture and to have these main characters that look like me, look like my look like my previous crushes, stuff like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, and I think that that's really interesting that you're saying with tropes that people know what to expect because yeah, it does build trust with the readers, and I think with enemies
Hmm.
to lovers that's particularly fun because when you have two characters who don't necessarily like each other, who can't really stand each other to start out with, well, we know there's going to be a twist in there somewhere, but we don't know what that twist is going to be.
Yes,
That's going
exactly.
to turn that dynamic on its head. But we can be patient for it because we know it's coming. Kind of.
Yeah, and then so if the trope is enemies to lovers, you know you meet the two enemies and you know that there's going to be something between them. But the thrill is like the thrill is like following along with their story and seeing how exactly it happens. Because every author does it differently. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I've got a couple of fun questions, and then we've got some questions with all of our attendees who are here.
Oh my God.
So, one of my,
Can I just say before when I announced this webinar on my Twitter, I told everyone, yes, there will be a Q&A. And then I told them, but please don't ask me any difficult questions. So we
well,
shall
we're
see.
we are going to see whether these are difficult or not. They seem like great questions from skimming them. But before we get in there, one thing I have to mention is we love at the library. We love a fantastical creature. We also love your cat, Darth Pancakes.
Oh
Please,
my
more
God.
Darth Pancakes
Uh
content.
oh well, okay, wait. Oh, he's like right beside my bed, but on the floor. So we shall see if he decides to make an appearance.
I was gonna say, like a true cat decides whether he wants to be seen. It's not up
Yeah.
to us. He will grace us with his presence or not. But so, my question is, what is your favorite fantastic creature? Which I would say Darth Pancakes counts, but we can go more fantastic. But especially if you had to ride one into battle.
Okay, so here in Philippine mythology, there's this serpent-like bird called a Minokawa. It's like, okay, imagine a combination of a dragon and a phoenix. That's basically what this bird is. It's huge, and it's also one of our sun eaters. Like it's also one of the creatures that explains like the eclipse, that explains the phenomenon of the eclipse, both solar and lunar and stuff like that. So it's basically like a giant bird, and I would love to ride that into battle because because I don't think anyone's gonna start anything with you if you're riding a giant bird that's made of fire.
And that can eat the sun. I mean, that
Yes.
kind of, I think, wins from the beginning. Fantastic. All right, we are going to grab a couple of our attendee questions. We want to make sure that we reach these before we run out of time. And so I guess one of them, I guess kind of in a similar vein of favorite
Mm.
creature is, and I'm going to so apologize if I mispronounce this word. We're all in a safe space here. We've all seen that meme about
This is
pronouncing
a safe
words you've only
space.
read.
No worries. No
Um,
worries.
so what kind of aethermancer would you be?
I would actually love to be a fire dancer because, well, I think everyone already knows that I'm a Zuko fangirl. Yeah, I think that fire is such a cool element to work with. It represents a lot of things that I gravitate to as a person. It represents passion, renewal, um, and like intensity. I love that type of thing, and I love the whole like fire aesthetic. So I would definitely probably be a fire dancer.
And this would go well with your fantastical steed that you're riding into battle, which also
Yeah,
you
exactly.
described as fire linked.
Okay, I had not made the connection. So yeah. So now we know.
Um, we have a question about whether with your other fanfics and transformative works, would
Mm.
you turn another one of those or build off of one of those into an original fiction or bring elements from other ones into the later issues of Hurricane Wars?
Well, never say never, but at the moment, like, so what happened with my fanfic is that when I rewrote it, I realized that like I didn't want to have to write the same story again, if
Mhm.
that makes sense. Yeah, and I think that it became so different from the original fic that now I don't know if I would ever like take one of my fics again and then rewrite it. But at the moment I'm leaning maybe no, I think there's a lot of stuff that I want to do, and I feel like a lot of those stories are like I have a very strong connection to those fanfics, and I don't want to have to take them down, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, because in a way it's like an archive of like my community of the bonds that I have formed with people, and yeah, but so at the moment I will just say like never say never, but at the moment no.
Well, and you mentioned with starting writing that, in fact, that you had so many stories you wanted to tell, and it doesn't sound like that's changed at all. And I'm sure with the
Yeah.
experience of writing this, you've got even more ideas, which in fact is one of our other attendees is wondering about. Though we are not at book two yet of Hurricane Wars, if you have any ideas of what you would be interested in writing after this series.
Yeah, I have like something marinating around in my head, like probably a contemporary fantasy, maybe set in my hometown, or like a fictional version of my hometown. Um I think that I kind of want to go for like dark academia vibes, and then maybe fae romance. I don't know. We shall see. Like I think I have to finish book two first before my editor flies to the Philippines and chains me to my laptop. But yeah, that's kind of where I am going. Like that's kind of where my head is at. Like my next series will probably be a contemporary fantasy.
I think it'd be amazing to see you take on some of the conventions with dark academia as another kind of genre that has so much richness, but has really kind of existed in the eastern seaboard of the United States for settings or Oxbridge for far too long for the promise that it has.
There are so many ghost stories here in the Philippines. I think like it would be a shame if we did not like make use of that to further if we did not incorporate that into dark academia.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, with that, you mentioned your editor chaining you to your laptop. We do have someone who's curious, obviously already anxious for the next installment of where you're at with book two.
So as of now, book two is planned to be released in exactly a year from the pub date of book one. So we are shooting for an October 2024 release date. And I like I am being cautiously optimistic that we will hit that release date, because I think like it's going okay. Like it's not going splendidly, but it's going somewhere. Like the draft is going somewhere. So yeah, October 2024, hopefully. So everyone, please keep your fingers crossed for me.
Well, and it's not like you're not busy with all of the other business of being an author right now, like talking to us and all of the promotion for your book, as opposed to writing your first book, where I think you got to focus on that a little bit more exclusively. Now you've got to
Yeah,
promote.
yeah, my so the Hurricane Wars took me almost 2 years to write. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that I was kind of taking my time with it, because like we don't have to like do this right away. But now that I'm working on book two, there's an actual schedule, and I'm legally obligated to turn in a book two because I have a contract. So I'm definitely feeling the pressure. A lot of my author friends told me about the warned me rather about the sophomore slump, wherein book two is apparently the hardest to write, because you are juggling book one pre and post pub stuff while working on your book two draft at the same time, and you're doing all of this for the first time. So yeah, I'm definitely a victim of the software war slump, but I promise that I'm trying my best. We are going somewhere with it.
Well, we are all on your side, and if it takes more time, we'll still be eagerly waiting for book two. Um, well, and that's an interesting one. This is just for me, as you mentioned, kind of handling pre and post pub. You come out of fandom in that particular community. Are you having to separate yourself from that a little bit with your book coming out, or are you engaging with all the kind of fan theories and comments that are coming through? What's kind of your relationship as people start making transformative work about your work?
I don't think that we are allowed to read. I don't know. One of my friends, I think it was Ali Hazelwood, one of my author friends, who also started out in fanfic, and she mentioned to me something like, "We are not legally allowed to read that," and I'm like, "Oh, are we not?" So so I don't think I can say out loud that I can read fanfic of the Hurricane Wars, but maybe in secret. You never know. I will never tell. But I have been there has been a lot of artwork for it already, and I'm so happy about that. Like it's so great to see. It feels like coming full circle, and it feels like coming full circle to see like fan art of Alaric and Taliesin, and yeah, it's just amazing. So I love sharing the fan art. Uh, about the fanfic, we
You've
just
never seen
know.
it. No one send it to you. Not allowed. Just pictures.
But again, you can never tell.
So you mentioned some of your author friends, and we actually have a question about that from one of our attendees
Mhm,
about who are
mhm.
some of the authors that you've met or become close to in the community, and if you've had any kind of felt any challenges with becoming part of the author community as you've gone through this process.
I think that I have had it relatively easy because there were a lot of other fandom authors who branched out into publishing before I did because they are much more hardworking and ambitious than I am. And so yeah, so I already started out with like a built-in author friend group, if that makes sense. So there's Ali, and then there's Julie Soto, there's Sarah Holly, uh Katie Shepherd, Jenna Levine, Elizabeth Davis. So I think that it's been great to have them around, and to like have a support group, like to just have people to vent to and stuff like that. And then after, like, during my in recent months, I've also recently become very good friends with Egbor Okason, who wrote Forge My Blood, a great book about Nigerian mythology, and it also has a lot of political intrigue and stuff like and magic. So check that out, guys. And then there's also Molly Chang, who is coming out with To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods next year. It's a Chinese fantasy, and it's yeah it's I'm so excited to finally start reading. And then there's who yeah there's Kritika Rao, who wrote the Surviving Sky. And then yeah, I think it's been everyone has been so welcoming so far, and yeah.
That's fantastic. And some great recommendations in there. You're going to have to keep our eyes peeled, make sure we have those in the library. Let's see, looking through, who is Darth Pancake's favorite character in the Hurricane Wars?
Darth Pancake's favorite character is, of course, Gaheris, the evil, the evil emperor.
True
Because
Cat.
yeah, Gaheris is just like he has his motives. He's unapologetic about those motives, and he thinks that he's doing the right thing, and he knows that he deserves fear and respect, and I think Pancakes gravitates to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we do have an attendee who's asking if you could talk a little bit more about world building and the world building that you
Mhm.
do. So I don't know if you've got some more thoughts on that a little bit. I know that's a bit open-ended.
Mm, well, I think being a dungeon master actually was a big help with regards to that, because so I don't know how familiar you are with Dungeons and Dragons, like with the mechanics, but it's basically like it's a role-playing game, right? Like as the dungeon master, you are the one who is responsible for setting the world, for giving your player characters something to react to, for giving them situations that they have to go through. And so one of the challenges with that is you are the one making the world for them, basically. You're the one telling the story. So it's a fine line between making sure that the world is immersive enough for them to be emotionally invested in it, and not like boring them with with like 30 minutes of talking about the, I don't know, like the all the specific bits of lore. Like you have to find a way to sprinkle that in, and not just dump it all at once. So I think learning to balance that as a dungeon master also helped me with this. Like it, I think it's definitely like it's still a constant learning process for me how to weave world building in more organically, but uh honestly, it can only improve from here. Like
I think that's a really interesting place to talk about that skill set, though, because yeah, in constructing in worlds and quests and things in ED, you are building the world. But if you do pontificate for 30 minutes, one, at least everyone I know who plays D&D will start throwing dice at you. And two, you're not like leaving space for them to get into the cool mysteries that you've sprinkled
yeah,
around, which is the
yeah.
mechanics of the game. And I can see how you want your readers too to kind of go down some of those rabbit holes and eventually get brought back into the main thrust of the story in a world that feels real. I think that's a really fascinating and really astute kind of description of that skill set. So thank you for that. That's fantastic. That same attendee's got a question about OTPs and is asking for one or two of your memorable OTPs
Oh,
and if they inspired.
I can give you my top five.
There
I'm
we go.
not
Let's go.
ashamed. Okay, in no particular order, we have Draco Hermione or Hermione from Harry Potter. Although, like, I will have like Harry Potter is not what it used to be, but at the same time, Hermione was very formative for me. It was it was the first fanfic I ever wrote for. Like, it was the first ship I ever wrote fanfic for. And then we have, of course, Zuko Katara, Zatara from Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's like the whole sun and moon dynamic, light and darkness, stuff like that. And then we have so there's this C drama called Love Between Fairy and Devil, and then one like I was really obsessed with it that last year. Like it was my entire world. It was my life. So so the main characters, like the lead couple is like this big bad mean demon king and this little flower spirit. So it's basically Grumpy Sunshine. It's everything I've ever wanted in a ship. So yeah, so it's Dongfang Jinkang and Xiao Hua. I probably butchered the translation. My Chinese ancestors are rolling in their graves, but yeah, it's them. Orchid Moon. And then we also have, of course, Rey and Ben Solo from the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Probably like the great like probably the ship that like really yanked me head head first into fandom because I feel like I never really interacted with online fandom a lot before the Raylo ship. Like Raylo is where I made my closest online friends and where so many like of course where this opportunity opened up for me and I'll always be grateful and I love that we just have as a fandom we're also close. We have our own language, we have our own memes and I think yeah, it's like it's honestly like one of the greatest things of my life, I would say, to have been a part of this fandom and to keep on being a part of it. And then, so how many was that? Was that four?
That's four.
Yeah, that was four. Oh my God. Okay, number five. So there's a show called The 100, and yeah, so I really shipped Bellamy Blake and Clark Griffin, or the Lark, as we say. And I think like Bellamy's actor is half Filipino. It was, and he literally looks like people I know. So so it was nice to have an enemies to lovers ship that actually had like someone that looked like people I know. And then although they're not like I don't think I think Relo and uh Dongfang Jingang and Xiaolanhua are the only ships here that are canon, like that actually end up being canon. I've just realized.
That's okay. That's the great part
Yeah,
about shipping, right? Like you
I
get to
know. Yeah.
believe that it should be there, even if the
Yeah.
writers don't agree. Let's see. Going through, we've got a few more. What inspired Her Majesty Urduja? Am I pronouncing that
Or
correctly?
Duha. Yeah.
Urduja.
Or Duha, yeah.
Fierce character. What inspired her character?
So the name Ardua is actually taken from legend or history, we don't know. Like there are conflicting accounts of whether she was real or whether she was just a myth. There's so Arduha is a warrior princess who who said that she will marry no man except for the one who defeats her in battle. Yeah, so that was definitely like a huge inspiration for me, like someone who was that fierce, that respected. And they're all like I think I just really like I just really gravitate to the trope of the cunning matriarch. It's a popular like Asian drama trope, Filipino teleserye trope, and yeah, so I drew a lot of inspiration from all the Filipino teleserye matriarchs of my childhood.
We love a strong matriarch.
Yeah, like
Oh,
the ones who plot, the ones who like who show up at the poor girl's house and they're like, "I'll give you 1,000,000 pesos to never talk to my son again." Something.
making a bold move. We don't have to like it, but she knows what she wants. She's going to make the world in that image.
Yes.
What is your writing process like?
Um, I honestly don't know how to describe it because I just sit down and I write. I know that I am so jealous of authors who know how to outline, who have extensive notes. I don't know, like that's really something that I aspire to try to do one day. I feel like I would be a much more organized person if I did that. But as of the moment, like I just sit down and I just write. I do set so what I have been doing lately is I set a monthly word count goal for myself, anywhere from 30,000 to 60,000 words. So so it motivates me to write every day because I feel like it gives me the feeling of working towards that goal, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have to say, during these author talks, we ask this question a lot, and I don't think anyone has given the same answer for writing process. So
Yeah,
everybody
it's a
writes different.
very yeah, your mileage may vary. It's a very subjective. It's very subjective.
All right, I have got one last process question and then two
Mm,
favorite questions, and then I think we are out of time. But we do have
okay.
another fan of Love Between the Fairy and the Devil. So, process question is, can you tell us a little bit about how you select cover art and if you are involved in that process at all?
So even like what even when the book was just in its early stages, I already knew that I wanted Kelly Chang to be my cover artist. Because I knew her way back when. I was a fan of her since our very early days in the Relo fandom. And Kelly is Malaysian, so I knew that she would be able to deliver the type of aesthetic that I wanted because it's not like the Philippines and Malaysia are identical in terms of culture, but there is like a similar aesthetic. Like all the gold, all the rich detailing, the bright colors. Yeah, so I think that I already knew that I wanted Kelly, so I kept pestering my editor when we started moving into cover art No, even before we started moving into cover art discussions, I would already be sending her emails like, "Oh, look what Kelly drew today. Isn't this amazing? Shouldn't she be my cover artist?" And then yeah, and then so I was very happy to know that they did reach out to her and I was very happy that she accepted. And it was also I think for the US cover it was also collaborative in a sense that they sent me the first draft and then I wrote down I sent back my notes, stuff that I wanted to add or revise, and yeah, it was yeah, I'm very happy with my covers.
It is absolutely beautiful. Again, I'll hold it up and try not to have Zoom blurred out, but it
Yeah,
is beautiful. And there are other beautiful editions internationally and available if anyone wants to go on the hunt for them.
there.
All right. So last two questions. Our attendees want to know two of your favorite things.
hmm
First one is your favorite thing about Adam Driver.
Oh my God. Wait, let me wait. No, I'm pressured. There's so many things. No, there's so many things I love about him, but maybe the height. Like, no, that's not it. No. The
Everything.
hair. The
Hair.
hair. No, no, the hands. No, can I just can I just say everything? I don't know.
We'll
He's
go with
like
everything.
he's actually like so Adam Driver is one of the very few American celebrities that that I really like that I have a crush on. It's so weird. Like he's I don't know, there's just something about him. He's very magnetic and then he's so big. So
I do have to say, our attendee did give the caveat that that was a hard question, which they weren't supposed to ask, but you did admirably,
yeah.
trying to
Oh
winnow
my
it down, but it's everything. And then finally,
Okay,
his
probably the hair. The hair is very luxurious and soft.
true. That's true. He has good hair. Very good hair. All right, we'll put hair slightly above the
Yeah,
everything.
slightly above everything else.
And so because we're a library, we are going to end with a book question, but could you
Mhm.
share with us one of your favorite fantasy books?
One of my favorite fantasy books. I'm on the spot again.
One of them. It doesn't
Okay,
have to be the absolute favorite.
okay. Can I say a series?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so my favorite fantasy series is the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. Uh, it's a parody of the fantasy genre. There are a lot of times where he lampshades a lot of fantasy tropes, but you can really tell that he does it out of love. And like it's for a comedic kind of world. It's actually there are a lot of moments of human softness and there are just some great quotes. I don't think there will ever be another writer like Sir Terry Pratchett and he is just so good at synthesizing fantasy and humor and social issues. Like it's really something that I aspire to. I think he I think he is I think like the Discworld series is a great example of how fantasy, no matter how outlandish the plot can be, still captures like the human experience, like the human heart. And yeah, that's what I love about it.
That is a fantastic recommendation. Yeah, I remember reading the first book in the series, which, it's generally not considered one of the best, but our wizard apprentice, I forget exactly what role he's in, but he's imagining electricity and opining how much nicer that would be than magic. And I had to put the book down as a kid who read fantasy books, thinking about how much cooler wizard school would be than regular school. And I go, all right, Sir Pratchett, I get it.
Yeah, and also another good thing about the Discworld series is that you don't have to read it in order like book one, book two, book three. You can just I think you can basically just pick up any any one of the books and because each book is a complete story within itself.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if you want to read one of Thea's favorites, go ahead and find your favorite Discworld novel. There's also some great graphics online letting you know kind of
Yeah.
where the characters reappear.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Thea, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. This has been an absolute delight talking with you.
Thank you so
Um,
much for having me. This was so much fun.
Oh, I'm so
Just
glad. I'm so glad. Yeah, well, we'll be shooting you another email, hopefully in October of next year when book two comes out, seeing if you want to share some
fingers
more thoughts
crossed.
about life as a writer. And thank you all of you who joined us today for the event. Again, we do have several copies of The Hurricane War from our friends at the Lincoln Library. We pull that after the event, so that if anyone had to leave early, they're still qualified. So if you are the winner, you will hear from us in the next day or two. But otherwise, Thank you again, Thea. Happy writing and congratulations on the success. It is well deserved. It's a wonderful book. And we hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Thank you, Lincoln Public Library, and thank you everyone who attended, even the one who asked the very hard questions. Okay. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.